Really packed session today, so I'm kind of eager to get things going. So we're really just so happy to have you here for today's hot seat coaching session. We are talking about navigating capital campaign costs. Our focus today is a really big one: capital campaign costs and planning. If your organization is dreaming about a new building, a major renovation, or any kind of big leap, this session is for you. We know that construction costs are skyrocketing, inflation is unpredictable, and fundraising targets can really feel like moving goalposts. So how do you set those realistic goals? How do you avoid budget blowouts? And how do you make your case to donors when the numbers need changing? To help us navigate all of this, we're thrilled to be joined by Rick Fourie, an expert in construction, project, and cost management, who brings deep experience in helping nonprofits ground their visions in smart, actionable plans. My name is Sandra Davis, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm the founder and CEO of Donorly, and Donorly works with small and mid-sized nonprofits at moments of growth and change to build their fundraising muscle using donor research, storytelling, and community building. And we really love those moments of growth and change, and that is what a capital campaign is all about: those high stakes, high impact moments that can truly transform an organization's future. It's essential to get the planning right from the very beginning, and that's why I'm really so excited to welcome today's guest expert, who brings deep knowledge in aligning construction realities with campaign strategy. So let me just tell you a little bit about Rick, and then I'll introduce him and let him tell you a little bit more. Rick is a seasoned owner's representative with over 30 years of experience aligning capital project goals with budget realities. He has been involved in more than 350 complex projects across 40 states and 8 countries. He's known for cost management and project leadership in the cultural sector. He guides teams and owners to deliver capital projects on time and on budget. Rick, welcome. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you, Sandra. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this hot seat coaching session. Getting to know you and your team and working together to put this all together. Your team is absolutely awesome, and really, really, really great to work with. So a little bit about me, where to start. Undergrad in technical theater, so I'm a failed theater major. I worked my way through college being a trade contractor. So I was roofing, millwork, concrete, mechanical, electrical. Then after I graduated, carried on with general construction, and I was trained as a quantity surveyor. That's really where I started to be exposed to the cultural sector. I've had titles like chief estimator, director of pre-construction, senior cost consultants, owner's representative, project manager, you name it. I'm a CCM and a Fourie certified general contractor. I founded Fourie Consultants back in 2018. We combine owner's rep services and cost management services, and we focus on culturally significant projects. Really, there's a synergy between the process, which is more the owner's representative side, and the hardcore cost management side, which is really getting into the weeds of the actual project itself.
Okay, so you know your stuff.
I've made plenty of mistakes.
So let's get into it. So I want to just do a couple minutes of housekeeping. So as a reminder, the call is being recorded. We'll share it with you all next week. If you need to turn on closed captioning, go to settings, accessibility, and then you can turn on the closed captions there. Before we move into questions from our attendees, we're going to begin by grounding us in some resources and insights from Rick. And in the second half of today's call, we'll answer some live and pre-submitted questions. If you have questions as we go or now, go ahead and drop them into the chat. Our colleague Weston, who is here with us today, will monitor the chat and help us work through as many questions as we can. So whether you're trying to navigate capital campaign costs, align your budget with real world numbers, or just need help thinking through your overall campaign plan, we want to help you work through that. When we go over your question, we're going to invite you to come off mute, introduce yourself, name, pronouns, title, state your question, and your organization. We may ask some clarifying questions so we can really get into it and help you process the issue that you're raising today. And feel free to put follow-up questions and comments and responses in the chat too. We love a kind of lively session in that way. Our ultimate goal is to keep everyone informed, be helpful, and learn from today. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So before we dive into our questions, I just think it's important that we just start framing the conversation a bit. In spite of all the uncertainty in the world right now, nonprofits are still dreaming big, as they do, as you do, and rightfully so. It's really dangerous to wait for a perfect moment. That moment may never come. And launching a capital campaign is always a challenge. It's always going to be a big, bold project. There's a quote I saw the other day that really resonated with me, and I thought was perfect for today's session from the author, Doris Lessing. Whatever you're meant to do it now. The conditions are always impossible. So I just love that quote, and I think I'm going to tape that on a wall somewhere. There's another thing that's keeping the conditions so challenging is the numbers aren't staying still. Construction costs have jumped significantly in just the past couple of years, and Rick has some information he'd like to share with us on the specifics. We really need to be clear-eyed about what organizations are at risk if they base their campaign goals on outdated estimates, wishful thinking, or incomplete budgets. That can be really, really dangerous. And it creates a disconnect. Because if the campaign goal doesn't reflect the true cost of the project, you either end up underfunded or scrambling to go back to donors midstream. Neither of these things bode well for continued success. So this moment, the moment of making these big decisions about your campaign, really calls for clarity. You need accurate cost projections before you set your fundraising goals, not after. And you need your campaign strategy and your project budget working in tandem from day one. It's all about setting up organizations to succeed and to move through those big growth moments with confidence and clarity. So Rick, can you give us a snapshot of what's happening in the construction market right now? And what should nonprofit leaders be paying attention to as they think about launching a capital campaign in this environment?
Well, yeah, it's the market right now. I mean, in a very simple word, it's getting sporty out here. On the one part of it, you know, we've had this persistent issue with the labor shortage, you know, for many years. And if you guys keep track of the news, we're now dealing with tariffs. Last time I checked, we had a 50% tariff on steel. Now that's on the actual material itself. And then it was about 2 or so weeks ago, one of my friend's job site was raided, and he lost 4 of his key people in an ICE raid. And he still have, last I spoke to him was last week, he haven't heard from them yet. You know, so not only do we have, you know, these tariffs to contend with, you know, but we also have this uncertainty. And I think uncertainty is really the word to look forward to, you know. So we've never really been here before, but we're motoring on through. Now the chart that kind of that's just pulled up. This kind of relates construction cost over time. Just based on this charts, I think you guys can see we've really had a lot of fun in the last 5 years. You know, so this uncertainty is definitely not new. It's just another phase. On this chart, basically what I did was I took $100 and I took it back to 1984, which was the earliest date that I had accurate construction data for. And then I used construction escalation, which is how much construction increases year over year. I used inflation, which is basically published, and GDP growth. And I plotted all of that on the same graph. And then just to make Sandra happy, I also put median household family income on this, you know, to try to relate all of that to show that it's not impossible yet. But consistently, what we've seen is that, especially since 2001, 2003, construction markets, the cost to build has exceeded GDP growth and inflation. Now, I have a theory that it's all related to the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. Really, what that act did was it moved a lot of kids that would normally be funneled into the trades, which ultimately determines construction costs, into universities. And really, we started to have this persistent problem with labor. To put it more into perspective right now, if you're a plumber with 5-year experience, you're easily making $150,000 to $200,000. That's what lawyers used to make. If you have a small business, you're making more than doctors. There's really, and that relates again to the median family income chart. That's really a reflection of an incredibly tight labor pool, an incredibly tight market. And that's kind of been a definer of construction costs for the last 20 to 25 years, really, is that labor pool. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. And then looking into the future, it gets incredibly murky. What we have right now is, I mean, I mentioned already with the tariffs and all of that good stuff, and the labor market is being shrunk even more because of it, of whatever's happening. People are getting pulled off of job sites. But also, it looks like housing starts right now is down about 7%. And more alarming, commercial construction seems to be down about 20%. But I'm not sure how accurate that statistic is. But to put it in perspective, the UF School of Music had a pre-bid that I attended, and I counted, I think it was something like 50 different firms represented. There was this other project up in Kentucky, and they had 100 slots to do a site walk. It was completely filled up. And they wouldn't allow anybody except an architect and a couple of other key people. But in general, they tried to keep it to a minimum, the amount of people that could walk these sites. So on the one side, we see all of these rising costs, but on the other sides, we're seeing a market that if the data proves to be true, has essentially jumped off a cliff. Where's this going to lead us? Buckle up. We don't know yet.
I don't know. Uncertainty is the new certainty.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about budgeting a little bit. So how do you make sense of all of this if you've got a project coming forward?
This is a project budget that I just did. Now, I'm going to keep on coming back to a very common theme in my world. Basically, budget early. This budget I generated for a client. It's for a performing arts facility. But really what it comes down to is understanding cost, understanding money, understanding what things really are for. So let me just make sure that I get my notes here. Essentially, people don't really know when they talk about cost, what they're talking about. It's often misrepresented and misquoted. So you'll see something that a project costs, $3 million, but what does that really mean? Is that the construction cost? Is that the direct cost? Is that including the design fees? Is it the project cost? So just to kind of put all of this in a framework, typically what I include as project cost is land cost plus construction cost plus soft costs. Then project cost plus financing plus an endowment maybe. I'll call that the all-in cost. Now that all-in cost really should be the target for a capital campaign, for a fundraising campaign. So to bring it back to this representative project, really what we have here is we have this is actually looking at it from a bit from the top down. So it's looking at the pre-development stage. This is really everything that you'll need before you hire an architect, okay, before you assemble that design team. Now, how you assemble that design team will directly affect these numbers, and there's 1,000 different ways to do it. We like to work with some people, we don't like to work. Anyways, there's all these different ways to put it together. But essentially, you'll need your land, you'll need to do feasibility studies, legal fees, permitting approvals, endowment, and a whole bunch of other items that you really need to prepare in order for the designers, but also very critical, you need to understand what you're going to build. And you typically want to do that before you get your architect. There's specialist consultants that will determine your areas. You might want to bring somebody in that's going to look at the renovation of your facility. So you would like to get that scope, at least a broad idea of what you want to do before you really engage the architect. Now, sometimes you need an architect to determine that, so this is not, a zero-sum game, but typically you want to do as much before you get that team on board as possible. Now, all numbers build upon construction cost. And that's just kind of, because I always have accurate construction cost data, then I can work my other costs back to it again. So I put construction costs as next, but what exactly is in that? It's all your direct costs, contractor costs, and then I can budget based on that for my architectural fees, which are usually percentage based. In this case, it was theater planner acquisition, uh, you know, project and cost management, commissioning agents, and other such items. Now, often we have to travel, so there'll be reimbursables, which is again is a percentage of construction cost. And then we come to owner costs, which are critical and a lot of people kind of overlook. Now, this particular client, we didn't include their own staffing costs or their fund, we didn't include anything from their side, but just know that it will take money on your side for staff and for team people, et cetera, as well. And that typically falls into this owner cost direction. But this involves, materials and testing, relocation and moving, fundraising. It costs money to make money, but Sandra can tell you a lot more about that than I certainly can. And again, we're trying to get into little things like relocation and moving and all of that good stuff, and recognize your donors. That's absolutely critical, but that also requires something that can be done construction wise. And you might even want to think about a gala opening. If you don't budget for it, you might have to take that out of your operating dollars.
It's
Then
really
all of this-
important
Yeah.
I was just want to jump in and say it's really important that you factor those, the fundraising, marketing, graphic design, all of those things into the campaign budget. So you're not throwing your annual budget out of whack. And then it's easier to like build and right size the activities you need to be successful in your fundraising.
Yeah, and then of course, industry standard contingencies. And if you just want to scroll down, this right here is the next page then, which is our construction cost. But again, you can see there's a certain amount of contingencies in this. And then if you go into details, the next page on down, you can really see where this is. Now we're getting into our direct cost. If you would just want to scroll it a little bit more. So this then breaks into your foundation slab on grade. Now this budget was generated based on a functional program area only. That functional program area is basically just, I need so much lobby space, I need so many bathrooms, I need such a big room. And based on that, you can kind of figure, okay, this is going to be on the ground floor. So once you know your footprint and your site constraints, then you know how big your slab on grade is going to be, how big your footings are going to be, but also how big your roof is going to be. Based on the other square footages, you can figure out how many levels you need, which gives you your skin, how high your elevators need to go. So basically, it's all based on ratios without actually needing a full flush design. Now, Webster's, I think they define an estimate as a statement of approximate cost or something along those lines. But I really very much view an estimate as an accurate summation of 1,000 different errors. So if anybody comes away with anything from this presentation, just really remember the more detail. If you see a budget in front of you, if you see an estimate in front of you, look and see at the quality of the detail. If you can break it into 1,000 different little pieces, give thought to each of those 1,000 different pieces and make it, basically you're making less mistakes. And ultimately, you know that the estimate is right because that regardless of what you change, the numbers is going to be like this. So even when it comes to thinking your front end, your owner costs, give it as much thought as you can, break it into as small of a pieces as possible, and then let it fly, because ultimately it will all budget and you should get a very accurate or a very good representation based on the scope of work for your preliminary budget before you even hired an architect. So, but that's in essence, just how we tend to do it. Now, there's opportunities then, when you bring the team on and you try to reach these budgets, you try to reach these budgets, but then it's just management,
Definitely in the
and
details.
yeah, and you get it, but the more detail, the better.
Yeah. You have a great chart that I want to make sure we show everybody that's really about how when you make decisions and when you plan and at what point along the way it can really affect your cost savings. So let's take a look at that chart, because I think this is really helpful for people. I know that, in the nonprofit space, you've got a board that's making decisions, you've got, leadership that may be more than one person, and it's really easy to kind of get into a habit of making decisions at the wrong point along the way. And the need to understand how costly that can be is something that really can be really, really important in a nonprofit setting.
Yeah. So essentially, I mean, this is actually an old chart with new colors, you know. But what it illustrates is really the program phase, the pre-design phase. You can eliminate an entire room and realize those savings without having a whole entire team having to jump on and make any changes to the drawings. So I always say that the more accurate you can get your pre-design estimates, your pre-design budget, the more realistic the whole process is going to be. Now, you might be able to get that detail a little bit later on, but again, you want to get that accurate budget reconciled with fundraising, which is absolutely critical, as soon as possible, because yes, you can have this budget, but the other piece of this is you're going to get a design schedule and a construction schedule. But the fundraising schedule is going to dictate the pace of all of this. And if you don't bring those two pieces together early on, you risk the chance of being in DD, in design development, when it takes a large portion, a large expense to make any changes if you realize that you're falling short of your fundraising goals. And if you have to put the project at hold in the DD, the architects and engineers, they got other projects going on. You could lose team members, which leads to mistakes on the drawings, which ultimately leads to uncertainty for the subcontractors, who defines the risk, who defines the cost. So simply through not reconciling fundraising and having those issues come up, it's almost like a snowball effect, that can ricochet through your entire project. So the simple solution here is set budget early, make sure it's a realistic budget based on real numbers, and always look at it when you're actually, if you have a 2-year fundraising campaign, construction cost is going to go up over 2 years. Just make sure that you escalate all of your numbers appropriately, because very often people do a great estimate, but it's from 5 or 10 years ago when I get it. And there's a 30 to 40% difference because it's never been moved to today's dollars. In the meantime, fundraisers have been working on 5-year numbers and there's a 30% change, so just critical to make sure that budget is done accurately and it reflects a real thing reconciled with fundraising.
Well, such good advice. Thank you. And that's just a great illustration of how important everything you have mentioned is to the success of your campaign.
Yeah, and just that red, don't try to save money after construction starts. As soon as the subcontractors bid it, you're kind of done. I'm actually dealing on a project right now where we don't even try to save money anymore because it just adds more money to the project. It's just ridiculous. You can't cut enough scope for bad process at that point. You just have to, it gets crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So both you and I, Rick, have witnessed many budget presentations in boardrooms. Any recommendations you have for tactics in leading those kinds of discussions? This is such complex information. Anything that you would advise an executive director, director of development, a founder in leading those discussions about budgets? Maybe have Rick by your side as the first one.
That's a very complicated question. I mean, everybody is so unique and everybody is so different.
Yeah.
I think the biggest challenge, for any nonprofit leader now is to understand what is real and what is not real.
Mm.
You know, for example, what I'm dealing with right now, because this market is so fluctuating, I got one contractor calling me up and say, "Hey, dude, add 30% to all the structural steel," and I'm like, "No, I can't because that's gonna kill my project, first of all." But then you talk to 4 or 5 more people. The data that's presented, uh, just always make sure that it is based on something that's real, tangible, and quantifiable.
Mhm.
Uh, Oftentimes people fall victim to dreaming.
Mhm.
Oftentimes people that dream will move them into a direction which is then presented to donors who ultimately might become disappointed if that vision is not realized.
Yeah.
So again, I'm just going to emphasize that early stage to make sure that all your fundraising materials uh, meets what you can actually afford to pay. I've seen projects where we lost a major donor because the project ultimately couldn't fund the one architectural feature that they were really truly in love with.
Mm.
And to lose that major donor that late in the game was incredibly difficult for that project.
Mm.
And again, then it went into the snowball. They had to stop to reassess fundraising. They didn't budget for that extra year of fundraising. They lost the momentum. The drawing conditions sucked, and that added additional costs. So it's just critical to get that information right early.
And I think maybe that these are messages that's really important to share in the boardroom too. How important it is to kind of lock in and make sure that your fundraising goals align with the project itself. A couple cautionary tales about donor dissatisfaction might be useful in boardrooms to make sure everybody understands how crucial this all is. Okay, thank you so much, Rick. That was really helpful in terms of a foundation for us. And I think I'm ready to pass it over to you, Weston, and you can help us get into some questions from the group.
Thank you, Rick and Sandra. These are great insights. Before I jump into some pre-submitted questions, I want to remind everyone that if you're working through a capital project yourself, if you have any questions for Rick and Sandra, we're here and happy to work through it with you. So feel free to drop it in the chat and I'll do my best to bring you up for discussion. Okay, this is one that was submitted anonymously from someone who signed up. The question is, we're a performing arts organization and have been migrating from space to space for the last 15 years. We have a vision for a future theater to call home, but not all the numbers. How early is too early to start talking to major donors about the vision?
You want
Well,
to start, or do you want me to?
Sandra, I think that's more fundraising. I have my opinion. I would love to add something after.
I want your opinion. Let me start. I think I have grappled with this before and I've come up with different answers, but I think that I want an organization like this to start talking about the dream to their major donors. So you may not be talking about a specific project, building, renovation, anything like that, but I would want you to talk about the dream and the vision and the outcome of that vision. Where does that building, where does that itinerant feeling for your arts organization, what does that do for you? What does that do for your artists? What does that do for your audience members, your education programs, your creative team, or your administrative team? And I think if you can start talking about what it would mean to your organization, and what you want to do then is look into your donors' eyes, see if they're lighting up, see if they're leaning in and asking for more, seeing if they are excited about what you're talking about, excited about that outcome, or see if they change the subject and run away. So then you'd start to identify who are the folks who might want to come along for the ride with you. So that's kind of how I would approach it. And then as you get more specificity, like those are the first people you go back to as you maybe have identified, a piece of land or building you want to renovate. Like go back to those people first and tell them, how things are coming along. And I think, Rick, this rings true for me, given that there are all these expenses that happen before you even talk to an architect. And I am always thinking about how those renderings are such a powerful visual to talk with donors about, but you actually need to talk with donors, particularly board members, much sooner than all of that. Now, let's hear what you have to say.
Well, I'm a preacher's kid, so my father served for many years, and the one thing he never did was ask for money from the pulpit. But there, it was a life of fundraising. I mean, that's basically the best way to put it. He had to keep the church doors open, et cetera, et cetera. Some of these projects, like the Dr. Phillips Center that I worked on, it took 16 years of work before we built phase one, before we broke ground on phase one.
Wow.
And another project up in Greensboro, I was asked this question during a fundraising meeting. I asked because the fundraisers were like, okay, we've achieved our goals, we've exceeded it. We're getting ready to wrap this up. And I said, no, you always fundraise. You never stop the fundraising campaign. You always have a way for people to donate to your organization. If it's not going to a capital campaign, it's going into an endowment for the arts to support your organization and moving it forward. So to talk to donors, I just organized a photo shoot, for example, on another job site, to get the dancers between the construction workers. It is integral to the business, especially in performing arts, but in museums, et cetera, to build that network, to build that community that supports your organization. And a capital campaign is just simply a target, to reach. But there's so many ways that community can support the organization and thrive. So simply put, talk to everybody that will listen, share the dream, because it's always a dream. And you need those people to come together as a community to realize that dream.
Yeah. Thank you, Rick.
That's great. Thank you both. My next question, I'd like to invite Lisa DeCaro up, who just submitted a question in the chat. Lisa, would you mind coming off mute and introducing yourself and your question to Rick and Sandra?
Hi, everybody. And sorry, I'm munching. Of course, you caught me right, like the mid-bite.
It's fine. It's a very relaxed thing today. Munch away.
So yeah, I put it in the chat, but we bought a building at the end of 2021, and we raised $7 million to buy and build that building. And then on top of that, took a loan, an interest-only loan, 5 years interest only, for $3 million as part of the $5 million purchase price. And now we're about to launch a capital campaign for phase two, and phase one included building out some spaces so we could move in and start operating. But phase two includes building out other really important spaces, some of which have already been contributed toward by some of the capital campaign donors. But it also includes, it's about a $14 million, at least right now, chunk for phase two. And that includes a $3 million payoff of our mortgage, because that's the equivalent of an extra $110,000 a year, donation toward operating. And it really will guarantee our sustainability and our longevity. We'll own the building outright. So my question is, we've always gone into it thinking we're going to raise $14 million. We're presenting this $14 million capital campaign to donors. Would it make more sense, given that construction costs are so unpredictable, but our mortgage is not, to maybe approach them as separate campaigns? Do you think it would make sense, in other words, to present a campaign to pay off the mortgage, to guarantee our longevity, before launching, say, an $11 million or $10 million campaign to build out phase two? Or do you think it is better to put them all together as one vision? And I noticed Glenn, who's my partner, put his camera on too.
I mean, I would say that when you're building the messaging for a campaign, you're always wanting to think about how you're going to inspire your donors. And talking about what you're going to pay for, talking about paying off debt is a hard thing to inspire people to buy into. Now, your very closest stakeholders may love that because they are there looking at the financials right alongside you. So that may be something to talk to your really, really inner circle about. But I would say I like the idea of packaging the next phase of the project and the mortgage together and talking about obviously the new space, what you can do in the space, and the opportunity to build capacity by eliminating this debt. So
Great.
I think that's how I would approach. Have you seen anything different, Rick? Have you seen other ideas around
No,
that?
I just want to kind of reinforce it again. It's very difficult to raise money for a mortgage because it's not a bank statement is not a pretty picture. And to have that capital campaign, to have that image, that is something that will definitely attract donors. And a lot of people that will donate to these facilities, they have a certain amount of savvy. So I would just simply be clear with them to say, listen, the first 3 million is going to go directly towards to where we owe this money outright. We're raising this $14 million. 3 million of this is going to go directly towards our building because we do not want to be strapped. And I would pitch it as saying we're being fiscal conservative with our donations. You're donating for the arts, and ultimately you will go on the donors. You will be recognized for making a contribution to this new piece.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for bringing your question, Lisa. Loved it.
Thank you, Lisa. All right. This is a question for you both. Are there any staff positions you recommend having in place for the planning or execution of a campaign? I think I'm looking at Rick. And frankly, Rick and Sandra, what are the pros and cons of hiring a full-time in-house staff member to complete some of this work or to handle logistics versus a consultant?
Well, from the design and construction side, the challenge that I face, is I don't know the inner workings. I don't know the inner needs of an organization. And because I direct a design team, I assemble that team, and basically they have to realize the vision of the client, of the team. And it's all communication, ultimately. The details, the contracts, the scheduling and all of that good stuff, that's my forte. But what the client really needs, they know. And all of my attempts to get to know them will not be that same level of the way that they know themselves inside of an organization. So I think when you think about that liaison, really, I don't think you should hire somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience to negotiate a huge contract with a contractor. That's you're going to get somebody else, you can get a specialist for that. But really the benefit that I see with is how the team will interact with the organization, with your production needs, with your performance needs, with your cultural needs. How do you want your building to operate? And the more information and the easier it is to get responses from your organization, whether that's through a dedicated person who coordinate everything or just the way that it's communicated to the team. I think that's a critical role that I often see neglect. It's just communication is key. So the fastest way to get somebody out, the better.
I think I would echo that. Communication also, when you're thinking about your fundraising staff or your campaign staff, communication is key. So when you've got a consultant who is coming in with campaign expertise, and they're not getting the full picture of the organization because while you're running the capital campaign and while you're raising money there, you're raising annual funds, you're running your gala, you're doing your golf tournament, all of the things you normally do. You shouldn't slow down on any of that. But there's a whole additional layer of organization that needs to happen then around and on top of that. And if those two things aren't communicating well, you're at risk of confusing donors. You're at risk of delaying an important ask. There's all kinds of things that you're at risk at. And I think one of the most important things, like the construction project itself, but the most important things around a capital campaign is momentum. You've got to keep the goal moving forward. You've got to keep your team excited, your board excited, seeing progress. You want your community, when you get to the point where you're in the public phase and the whole community knows about it and knows about your goal, you want to keep showing success and movement forward. So for every organization, it's going to be different. Do you need somebody in-house who is your campaign manager, so that they're at the regular staff meetings, so that they're constantly in the office day in, day out, kind of making sure that everybody's still thinking about the campaign, even when they have all the other things to think about. We try to be as embedded as possible in the teams that we work with, so that we are, in staff meetings, we are trying to work day to day with them. But as you said, Rick, there's nothing like literally being on the team and only working for one organization. And, ideally there's a hybrid of those things, I think, that probably works best.
It's a great segue into our next question. And I want to remind everyone that if you, as we close in on the hour, if you have any last questions for Rick and Sandra, feel free to put them in the chat. But Sandra, you mentioned momentum. So I think this is a good segue into a question from a community-based organization who said, we got an estimate a year ago and were unable to move forward. But with new board leadership, we're deciding to get an updated estimate and explore our building project. But the new estimate is approximately 30% higher than previous. How do we revisit our campaign goal without derailing momentum? So I'm thinking that maybe they had discussions about, as you said, Sandra, the dream, and they were starting to formulate it, and they had one number in mind. Now it's very different. How can we navigate this change?
I think, go ahead, Rick, because I think you might be able to solve for some of it.
Well, my tendency in this case would be to start with a sledgehammer. No, it's there hasn't been a 30% movement in the market in the last. I mean, if you want to be really realistic, yes, there's this concern about tariffs. Yes, there's been some labor, but for any jump in this market of 30%, something else must be going wrong. So the one thing that I've discovered is construction cost. It's all about people. When you get that spreadsheet, it basically is a reflection of the, it's basically the sum of everybody's fears, because ultimately it's based upon risk. And the people that really determine that cost are the people that have the least ability to mitigate that risk, which is the people in the field, which is the workers, which is the subcontractors. So if I got that big bump, first of all, I would just simply sit them down and say, listen, please explain this to me. Is this, there must be a miscommunication here. What is going really on? And down at the bottom, it must be an issue where somebody believes that they're so embedded with this organization that they can't make a change. Unfortunately, a lot of contractors seem to think that they're irreplaceable. So they but long story short, it starts with a conversation. I wouldn't throw out the previous numbers. I would simply understand where they come from and understand what's going on. And you can really truly bid the same house right next to each other at exactly the same time with two different people and get 30% difference. So I would look at the process, see what's going on, see who feels that they can get away with this, and get to the bottom of it and just see, hey, what can we do about this and solve it.
And I suppose if you have all those conversations and it really is 30% for who knows what reasons, then when you go back to your early donors, you have specific story to tell and reasons why. And I would say that this is the reason why there's a silent phase of a campaign, because there are things that, kind of move around, numbers move around a bit, in the early stages. So you want to make sure that once you've told the entire community your goal, that it's a goal you can stick with. and you know you can achieve. And it's interesting what you said, Rick, about the budget being, what did you say, like the accumulation of everybody's fears?
Yes.
And it just made me think, like, on the fundraising goal side, it's kind of like that too, but unfortunately it skews in the opposite direction. Oh, we can't raise that much, you know, let's just hope that the project doesn't cost that much. Let's keep it to, you know, 20 million and hope that the costs don't increase. And then they do, and then you need to adjust your goal. So I would also say that, you know, when you're having those really early conversations with your first donors, try to be expansive about what you intend to do, and make sure that it encompasses the full project and some contingency and an endowment, you know, in order to support the costs of the building. All of those things, in those early conversations, you should have realistic numbers, because if you discover that you don't have the donor base to support that, better to know it then. And, you know, then you can make some adjustments and changes if you have to.
Sandra, just to tell some stories, I think I was about 26 or something like this. There was a project up in Cleveland, $30 million budget. It came in 3 million over budget. I had a list as long as my arm of savings and costs, you know, that I presented to the board.
Yeah.
And this little old lady raised her hand, one of the board members. I don't know what her name was, but her lady in blue. But I can donate another million. And you know, we raised the 3 million in the board meeting.
I love that.
Another project, you know, we had another huge issue, and it was in California. And the main donor, I'll just use his first name, Peter, put me in his V12 Mercedes, and we're off to the mountains. And he basically concluded he's already donated $100 million to this building. And we're actually sitting on a curb having a cherry pit spitting contest. And he said, listen, Rick, I don't care. I am 87 years old. I'm going to die soon. I want to sit in that seat and listen to a concert before I die. If I donate another $100 million, make it so. I am just dumbfounded by the generosity of some people, about their ability to gift, about the contribution they want to make to their communities, you know, about their legacy. So I would say do not underestimate your donor base.
Love that.
And they just need to be honest, open. This is the situation, and that's the best way to communicate, you know. But anyways, that's, you know, so
Those are
that's
great
the only piece I
stories.
can add there.
Those are great stories. And, you know, it makes me think, like, most of the people who are your major donors have been involved in a construction project, whether for their business, for their home or homes. There's a variety, you know, this is not new territory for them. And they know how these things go. So I think, you know, it always goes back to communication. It always goes back to relationships. It always goes back to transparency. And those two stories just exemplify all of that.
Thank you. The last question, and I know we have about 9 minutes left, so we can do some quick tips. This person submitted, we're worried our donor base is already stretched. What are some tips for communicating the vision to our supporters and expanding the donor base, our donor base for this new project?
I mean, campaigns are such a great opportunity to expand your donor base. It's really, you get to tell a new story about the future of your organization. And it's an opportunity to kind of refresh that story, to revisit your dream, your vision for your mission. Don't forget your mission when you're telling your building story. It's not, these two things aren't separated. Don't forget the clients that you serve, the artists, the, you know, the students, whoever it is. Don't forget those people. Keep those center in your conversations around the building. And then if you have a building that, or if you have an organization that has a bit of a legacy, has been around for a few years, make sure you're going back to, you know, your donors, your alums, your, you know, community members all the way back, because this is an opportunity for them to come forward again and say, what a great experience I had 10 years ago. I want to make sure that this kind of experience and more is happening for the next generation. And I'm in a position to invest in this now. So I think those are the kinds of things. I think campaigns are just a great opportunity to refresh your brand, to call people in who haven't been around for a while, to deepen your relationships with the people who are around now and help them really invest and take ownership of your future.
Yeah, and I just know that I mean, Sandra, a new capital campaign is a new opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity to build your community, you know, and if not building your community, it's to solidify your community.
Yeah.
We're all on this, you know, we're on this roller coaster together, whether we like it or not, and your community supports you because they are with you. So again, I would just say, if yes, people do feel stretched if you go to the same people over and over again. But at the same time, why are they supporting your organization? They want to be a part of it. They are committed to you, you know. So again, people and working with them and building on that community, I think it's super important, and a new capital campaign is critical to that.
Thank you. And on that inspiring note, I'm going to pass it to Sandra for to wrap us up.
Well, can't we just go another hour? This is so much fun, and there's so much information to share here. It's really, really, really exciting. I really love this conversation, and I do feel like we could go on and on and on. So thank you so much, Rick, for joining us and sharing all of your knowledge and your wisdom. And it is helpful to know that you're preacher's son, because that explains your enthusiasm and galvanizing abilities here. So I really, really enjoyed this. And so let me just share some details on ways to connect with me and with Rick. You can find me and our team at donorly.com, and we're on all the socials at @_donorly. And we'll share my LinkedIn profile in the chat. And then Rick, why don't you tell us where everybody can find you?
My company, well, I'm not creative, Fourie Consultants. We're based in Tampa, Florida. Our website is fcicost.com. My email rfourie@fcicost.com. So our last name, fcicost.com. And I'm on LinkedIn and all those other places. And we're always here. But while we're closing, Sandra, I just want to again say thank you very much for putting all of this together. And I want to thank everybody for taking the time out before before next week. You know, it really shows that people are passionate about their organizations and about bringing these communities together, you know. And I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak to you guys. And Sandra, thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this with you. Thank you.
It was an absolute pleasure. Well, thank you everybody for joining too. So we're going to share all these contact details in an email to follow. And Rick very generously created a blank budget template for us, which we will share with everybody too. So you can use that as your basis. You might not need all the complexity of that budget template for your project, but at least you know that all the bases are covered, all the questions you need to ask are asked. So we'll share that with you in an email. And then next week, at the beginning of the week, we'll send out a recording of the call, some key takeaways, and some details for our July hot seat coaching session. So in July, we're going to be talking with Britt Gage. Britt may be here, sitting in. She's the CEO and founder of All Trades. And their company is amazing. They help resource-constrained nonprofit teams increase their capacity, improve their general operations, and operate more efficiently. And don't we all want that? So I'm really excited to talk with Britt next month. That session is going to be on Friday, July 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And we hope we'll see all of you there. This was so much fun. Thank you all. Thank you, Rick. We look forward to keeping in touch via our email list and on LinkedIn. And Rick, by the way, left his phone number, so you should feel free to call him if you want. He's happy to take those calls.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone.